Simple Rethink presents Why People Cheat in Happy Relationships. The transgression of cheating is undeniably an existential threat to a monogamous relationship. This inexcusable taboo, committed by an unfaithful partner, is often seen as the expression of two moral failures of selfishness and perversion. The clinical defense for transgressors is that cheating can be the result of retaliation for emotional neglect or a lack of love and attraction. However, the gap in this explanation is that the same trespass occurs even in relationships where these shortcomings are absent. This is because infidelity is not a misdeed exclusive to the morally flawed or broken. Some of the most heartbreaking acts of unfaithfulness occur in relationships that are happy, committed, and outwardly healthy. But the same causes that explain cheating in broken relationships cannot fully account for its occurrence in seemingly happy ones. This discourse is not about justifying betrayal, offering excuses for transgressors, or absolving them of wrongdoing. Rather, it is an invitation to explore a different psychological perspective on a deeply human and often under-examined failing, with the hope of fostering understanding that may help prevent future transgressions. If you've ever been perplexed by why infidelity occurs in an otherwise happy relationship, this discussion offers additional context beyond common explanations. Thanks for watching. Let's dive in. The regret of missed opportunities. When the past refuses to stay in the past, the impulse toward an affair can begin with an entanglement with memory rather than actual desire. Ordinary episodes of boredom can cause a person's memory to drift back toward the lover they could have chosen, or the life path they didn't take. Returning to doors that once stood open but are now closed can result in mourning foregone experiences, chances not taken, or possibilities surrendered in the pursuit of commitment to their chosen partner. The emotion that resurfaces isn't necessarily a longing for another relationship, but regret over opportunities that were once possible and are now forever lost. In these situations, the accountability that sustains loyalty and the boundaries meant to protect discipline can at times awaken regret for things left undone. When the mind begins to replay its what-ifs, the temptation to cheat appears not as actual desire for another person or as a craving for betrayal, but as a call to revisit choices that were never explored. It is less about dissatisfaction with present life and more about unfinished business with the past. A return to moments that were never fully lived can easily become a temptation to reclaim experiences that once slipped away. The motivation to cheat emerges not because the current relationship is lacking or from a desire to replace a partner, but because the past feels unresolved. Nostalgia for the unlived identity. While the safety of a monogamous relationship can be stabilizing, it can also feel final. The reality of permanence may, at times, resemble a kind of enclosure rather than safety. This tension can give rise to a quiet grief that many people never name, which is the grief for the person they might have been. Nostalgia for the version of oneself who might have formed different friendships, loved more boldly, or explored all opportunities when it was still permissible, can evolve into regret for a life that never fully unfolded. When a person's surrendered identity becomes entangled with current commitment, and the longing for the unlived life includes adventures not taken or relationships never experienced, the temptation to cheat may arise as an attempt to reconnect with an identity that existed before monogamy caused its abandonment. An affair, then, can feel like a brief step outside the capsule of finality. In this situation, cheating becomes a mirror through which a person revisits a former identity rather than a doorway to a new one. The transgression is not always rooted in the belief that the present relationship is inadequate, but in the feeling that it has become constraining. The resulting dissatisfaction is less about replacing a partner and more about reconnecting with a version of the self that feels lost, yet quietly endures. The burden of righteousness. The commitment required to sustain a monogamous relationship is largely viewed as an expected duty. Yet, for some, it can quietly become a burden. The expectation to consistently do the right thing and the discipline of permanent restraint can, over time, test the limits of a person's virtue. When the role of the good one becomes too heavy, or when those efforts feel unacknowledged, righteousness can begin to feel less like integrity and more like confinement to a role that must be maintained rather than a value freely chosen. For someone who has always been faithful, responsible, and emotionally present, decency itself can turn into a silent pressure. The urge to cheat may emerge not as a pursuit of pleasure or a rebellion against a partner, but as a release from the obligation of moral perfection. In this situation, cheating may be a need to step outside the rules, to loosen the weight of expectation, and to feel alive as the person one chooses to be, rather than the role one is expected to uphold. The transgression becomes an escape from accountability, driven not by lust alone, but by defiance. It's less about the desire to be with someone else, and more about the relief of no longer having to perform goodness. Here is the closing reflection. Understanding why people in seemingly happy relationships cheat is not an attempt to erase responsibility or justify harm. It does not excuse betrayal, nor does it soften the pain it causes. Pain is still pain, and the consequences matter. But not all acts of infidelity are born of cruelty. Some arise from undiagnosed inner confusions yet to be resolved. Others emerge from unexamined longing and unacknowledged shifts in needs and identities that were never given language or space. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing in a happy relationship is not open conflict, but quiet neglect of the changes that have emerged within. Unattended emotions do not disappear. Rather, they wait for an opportunity to seek expression. If any part of this discourse made you rethink, it means you liked this video. Give it a like and hit the subscribe button. Turn on the notification bell and be among the first to watch our next video. Thank you and goodbye.